Hi there, this is Dr. Everybody to talk about Project 8. Now this project is kind of similar to the last one. What we're going to do is we're going to read a file and we are going to select some information out of that file. Then we're going to print some information and there'll be a little arithmetic in there. And as a final step, we'll plot a graph of that information. So let's take a look at this. What I said was we're going to read a file. We're going to select some information. And we're going to do a little arithmetic. Then we're going to print. And then we're going to plot. And when I say select information, we're going to put that in a list or a dictionary. You get to choose. So, read a file, select some information, put it into a list or a dictionary, print out, plot. That's the basic idea of what we're going to do. And when we look at that, if I go down into the test cases, it's a little hard to see. We select a file for input. We select a region that we're going to print out. We're going to print out that information. We're going to do a little bit of arithmetic first. We're going to find the highest GDP per capita, so that means you got to do a little division there and print it out. Print it out nicely. It's got dollar signs and commas and so on. And the lowest GDP. And do the same thing with income per capita. Again, finding the highest and the lowest and printing it out. And then we print all the states in the region with all the detail that we have, which is everything that we read off of the file, plus the two more things with per capita GDP, income per capita. So you calculate these, very simple, just a little arithmetic that you do, and then we ask you whether you're going to plot it. So the first couple of test cases don't have any plotting, so you can just focus on getting the data. And you select regions, and one of the possible things you can select is to select all. And if you select all, then we get all the states printed. Notice that not only do we print these out nicely in columns, you can see that we have the commas in there. These are printed out alphabetically, and it all looks. It should all look nice in a table. Then we have a test case here where we finally say yes, we do want to plot it. You specify first what's going to be on the x-axis, then what's going to be on the y-axis. So there's population on the x-axis and GDP per capita. That's what the little p means. So GDP per capita here. And then you do a plot, and we give you a function that actually draws that line in there. So you get a little extra here that you have to do, and you could select anything out of this list for the data that you're going to plot. Let's take a look at this. Now, our data is in a comma-separated values file. And you can look at that if you like in something like Excel. And every one of these has a state name, it has a region, so Alabama's in the southeast, it's got a population, GDP, income, and so on. And what you're going to be doing is asking, like, oh, I want to see what the New England states are, and then you'll be doing all your work with the New England states. The file, if you actually look at it as a text file, it is a comma separated values file. So each information is separated by commas. There is a header file which we can use readline to skip past that if we like. Somehow we have to do that because that's not data that we're interested in. So our task is to go through this, and suppose I said I want the New England files. I want the New England states. So I read through this, and there's one that's New England, and we just keep going down. There's another one that's New England. There's another one that's New England. And these are the states, if I specify New England, these are the states that I'm interested in. How might I do that? Well, the way I like to start with this is to say something like, the name of my file is state_data. Oops. I like to do something simple like this first, just to see if what we have. Give it a stupid name here, and let's run it. And we see it prints out all the states and their information. All right, now, eventually you're going to have a function which prompts and opens it. But for right now, let me see how I can do with this. We can, we know we're going to have to take the line and strip the carriage returns off it and split it on commas. And I like to do this. Now I've got that information in lists. Okay, that's good. And let's see. So if so the region is in the item 1, I hope. So here's how I might, suppose I wanted to just look at the New England region. Got to remember my quotes there. And I believe it's, where's New England here? So there it is. That looks like I've got the string correct. And we see that I have successfully printed out the New England states: Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, my home state of New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And there's some information about them. Now, there's obviously a lot more that I need to do, but that's the basic idea. I now have to put that information into some data structure, and and this will be a function, and I'm going to take this stuff and put it into a function, and that will return my my data structure, whatever it is, a list or a dictionary. But now I've got to start on what this is going to do, and I can take this information now, I can put it into a list or a dictionary, and there's the core that I have. Now you have to remember that I do need to calculate the GDP per capita, and the income per capita. So what that's effectively going to do is I have some information here, and I'm going to need to put in two more pieces of information. One, the GDP per capita, and the other being the income per capita. That's all the information that I need to work with. I'll return that from my reading function, and now I have information about New Hampshire, and I have to, or I mean about the New England states, and then I have to find the max and the min of these, the per capita of both of those. So that gives me 4 pieces of information. Then I print those, and then I print. So I print that, and then I print all of this information in nice columns. So see how you do this a little bit at a time. Printing it all in the columns, that really ought to be a function. Finding out the max and min, there's another function. There's a lot of opportunities here for functions, and once you get all that information, then you can go and look at your first couple of test cases, see how you're doing with that, and once all that is working, then you can work on trying to do the plot. All right, so what do we give you for plotting? We gave you a file, and it has some familiar things in it. We have the stuff that I need in order to do the run file. We've seen that before. That's old hat. Optionally, I gave you some constants here. Here's a list of the regions. Here's the values, the names of the values, and I even gave you the prompts that we have. And so you can use those, or you can modify them, whatever. That they're completely optional. I just thought I'd save you a little bit of typing. There is a regression line, and so I just gave you that as a function. And what is the regression line? That is this line right there. Okay, that line right there. So that function actually draws that line. We did it for you. You just have to use that. Finally, there's a plot function, which is incomplete. So let's take a look at the plot. So you have to put parameters in there. There's a placeholder at this point. Notice that you're going to prompt for the axes, and then you build the X list, and you build the Y list. And by the way, list comprehension is very nice there. Once you have those, you create a title. You label the X and the Y axis, and then you just call this to plot it. What are X and Y? X and Y are lists of floats. Those are lists of floats. There's 2 lists. They're the X and Y coordinates. They have to be the same length, because for every X you need a Y. So you create those. Which values do you use? You prompt, build those values here, and then just pass it to the scatter plot. This, if you have a list of corresponding state names, I'll leave you to figure that out. This puts the names on the graph, plots the line. And then I give you 2 ways to show it. If you use show, that displays the plot in the Python shell. But when you run the test cases, it actually won't draw. So it's nice to have this to create the file plot.png, and that's, so that'll be, it's just like when you do run file, it generates the output file. You've seen that. If you include this line here, then you will also get a plot.png. This function that's provided by Python graphics package, it decides the format of the plot based upon the extension that you have. So if you put in PDF, it will make you a PDF plot, and so on. So this is all set up. This is really the part that you have to do. The rest of it I gave you, except that you've got to figure out what goes in with those passes, and you have to build the state names. But the core of it here is that part. And what I would suggest doing is forget about prompting. Just pick two of these things, like population and GDP per person, and put those, just hard code those in there and get this. Get those X and Y's just built based upon two of those. What these do is these give you an index. You have to make those into an index into your data structure. And that will be and those will be columns in your data structure, like the population column and the GDP per capita column. And so you have to take that information and to get it into a list of X's and a list of Y's. Okay, good luck.